वेदऋषयः समारभ्य वेदान्ताचार्या मध्यमाः योगीरां सुरत्कुमारपर्यन्तं वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् रत्नाकराधौतपदां हिमालयकिरीटिनीं ब्रह्मराजऋषिरत्नाढ्यां वन्दे भारतमातरम्. In the last two classes, we discussed about the origin of the Vedas on the banks of river Sindh. The most ancient civilization of the world is Vedic civilization. Lot of research has been done by Indian scholars as well as Western scholars about the origin of the Vedas. Indian scholars like Lokmanya Balagangadhar Tilak, R.C. Majumdar and many others have done intense research. So also Max Muller, Jacobi and many Western thinkers have pondered over the origin of the Vedas, etc. But all have agreed that it is the most ancient civilization of the world. The Westerners presented a very strong viewpoint that the Vedic civilization in India was founded by immigrants from the northern side of the Himalayas, Indo-Iranians. They said they came and settled down on the banks of river Sindh. Ganga, Yamuna, Brahmaputra, they all became the cradle of the civilization. But modern research scholars have rejected the theory that people who came from outside the Bharatavarsha had fostered the civilization, because all the evidences found in the Vedas, the Puranas and Itihasas, they all emphatically proclaim that this Vedic civilization originated in India on the banks of river Sindh, and the Aryan theory that Aryans, they migrated from Indo-Iranian area, they migrated, they settled down in the Himalayas. It is rejected. The Aryan invasion, they came. It is said that the Aryans came from northern side of the Himalayas and they drove the original people who are called Dasyus by the Westerners or Dravidians. They were pushed to the southern part of India, and these Indo-Aryans occupied the northern part of Bharatavarsha and created the Ved. That theory is rejected totally because there is no evidence for it. The modern scholars are unanimous in their viewpoint that this Aryan or Vedic civilization has its origin on the banks of river Sindh, and it is not imported from outside India. The Vedas also make mention of the word Arya. In Sanskrit, Arya, the Vedic language, Arya means refined, who is cultured, who is civilized. You see, man emerges from the barbaric state of existence to a highly civic life, a moral and ethical life endowed with values. That refinement of the man is called Aryanization. Aryan, therefore, means refined. modern research in the Indus Valley, especially by people like Airavati Mahadevan. He was a very great scholar on the Indus Valley civilization. He was a government servant, IAS officer, and he emerged as a great research scholar on Indian culture, heritage, especially on the Vedas, on the Indus Valley civilization. He deciphered some of the symbols that were found in the Indus Valley. And one of the most important symbol that he took up for exposition is the bearer symbol. In the Indus Valley, this bearer symbol was discovered by Airavati Mahadevan and other historians. And the meaning and significance of this bearer symbol, it was exposed by these scholars. In this symbol, you find a V sign on the top, and then there is a bearer symbol. Usually in India, people carry heavy loads on their shoulders by hanging two baskets at the two ends of a pole, and they carry it on a shoulder. So they are all known as bearers. This bearer symbol, you find those two baskets hanging in the sides, and there is the body of the person and his legs. This symbol is supposed to be the symbol of ancient Vedic Hindus society. In the Hindu society, when we go into the details of Vedic civilization, we find that the people in Indus Valley, they constituted mainly 4 sections: Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. Last class I explained that Brahmana is not the name of a caste, but it is the name for the people of refinement, people who are advanced in their intellectual and intuitive search, and who have attained to higher spiritual perception of the world, of the soul, of the goal of life, etc. They were known as Brahmanas. Brahmani ramate iti Brahmanaha. The definition of the word Brahmana is the one who always revels in the knowledge or wisdom of that ultimate reality, Brahman. These Brahmins, in the Vedic civilization, we find they were worshippers of Mother Nature. They adored and worshipped sun, Savita. Yesterday we celebrated Makara Sankranti, worship of the sun. It has come down from the Vedic period, because we all know that the sun is the source of all energy. It is the source of life. Without sunlight, no life is possible on this planet Earth. So the ancients worshipped the sun, and modern scientists also tell us that many of the planets, stars, etc., they have come down from the sun. So sun was supposed to be worshipped as the supreme creator of the entire universe, because the entire universe is rooted and dependent on the sun, solar light. And this sun What is sun? It is nothing but a ball of energy, ball of fire. That fire was represented in the Agni of the Havana Kunda. Our Vedic rishis, they worshipped Agni, fire, a representative of the sun, in every hearth and home. And this worship of fire, that Agni Kunda, it was the highest, the topmost symbol of Brahminism. A Brahmin who performs Agnihotra, performs this ritualistic worship of the fire, he was considered to be the most enlightened. So this symbol of that fire or the Homakunda, it is given on the top, and this bearer symbol, Airavati Mahadevan has explained, it represents the kings and emperors of this land. They bear the responsibility of the whole nation, and they are represented as the bearers, one who shoulders the responsibility. Then comes the next category of people, Vaishyas. Vaishya is one who produces the wealth for the nation, for the society, for the community. In our physical body, it is the stomach which produces the energy. We take the food and it is digested, and the digested food, it supplies energy to various limbs in our body, including our head and leg. So, this body represents the Vaishya. Then we find these two legs. The scholars have explained that the whole society depends on the workers, especially the peasants, the farmers who go into the field and produce the crop, etc. The wealth is produced with the help of these people. They are called Shudras, laborers, workers in the field. So the whole society, Hindu society, consisted of these four sections: Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra. It is symbolized in this symbol which is discovered in Mohenjo-daro, Harappa by historians, and it was deciphered by scholars like Airavati Mahadevan. In the Vedas also, we find evidence to this. In the Vedas, in the Purusha Sukta especially, it is mentioned, Brahmano asya mukhamasid, bahu rajanya kritaha, uru yad vaisyaha, tadasya yad vaisyaha, patbhyagum shudro ajayata. Mukham is face, the head. The whole society depends on the Brahmin because he is the highest intellect for the sustenance of the society, for the protection of the society, for that intellectual guidance. It is given by the one who is called as Brahmanas. So, Brahmano asya mukhamasit, he was the head, he was the face of the whole society. And all the other sections of people, they depended on him for guidance. Even a Vaishya who produces wealth, before starting the business, he approaches a Brahmin, he gets the pujas, etc., Lakshmi puja, etc., performed by the Brahmin. A Shudra who is tilling the land, we found in the last lecture I told that before tilling the land, he does the Bhumi puja, he also depends on the Brahmana. So all sections of people, they depended on the Brahmins for the guidance. Brahmano asya mukamasit bahu rajanya kritaha. The king or emperor, he is the one who sacrifices his life, whole life, for the protection of the entire society. The Raja, the word comes from Rakshati iti Raja. He is the one who is the protector of the whole society, including the Brahmins. He is Kshatriya, Kshatra Virya, the warrior in him. It protects the whole society. So, Bahu Rajanya Kritaha, he is the shoulder who is bearing the whole responsibility of protecting the country. And Urutadasya Vaishyaha, the Vaishya who produces the food, and Shudra. So, this is a symbolic representation of the ancient Vedic society mentioned in Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, etc. We found that the Vedic rishis were worshippers of the sun, and they worshipped the natural forces, the sun, the moon, the stars, the planets, the wind god, the fire god, water, earth. All these elements were worshipped by the Aryans. Because, why they worshipped it? Because they are the sustainers of life on this planet Earth. So, Vedic gods, we find the early gods, Indra, Mitra, Varuna, mentioned in the Vedas. Indra, who is Indra? Indra represents mind. It is our thought, it is our ideas which sustain us. And Indra, the mind, leads all other elements for the sustenance of man. So Indra is supposed to be the chief of all the gods. Mitra, sun god, he sustains the planets, he sustains life on earth. Varuna, the sky god, the sky which sheds water, rain, and creates seas and lakes and rivers. So Varuna is the god producing the life-sustaining water. Indra, Mitra, Varuna. Without water there is no life at all. Very essential for human existence, for existence of any living being, whether it is an animal or a plant. So, Indra, Mitra, Varuna, and Vayu, we need oxygen, wind. Without air, we cannot sustain ourselves. So, Indra, Mitra, Varuna, Vayu, and Prithvi, Mother Earth, she produces wealth for all of us. She produces food for all of us. So, Prithvi is also worshipped. We find when we perform the Havan, usually we first make the offering to the sun god, and then we make the offering to Varuna, Vayu, and then Apaha, water, and Prithvi. This is the system of worship in the Vedic Agnihotra. And then we invoke the various gods and goddesses who are known by different names. So Vedic rishis, they were essentially the worshippers of nature, worshippers of that ultimate consciousness which manifested in all these and sustained the human life. There are, scholars have pointed out, different stages in the development of Vedic worship. Before we go into the Vedic worship, we will see the classification of the Vedas. Vedas are knowledge which is incorporated in the sayings of the great, in the vision of the great rishis and uttered by them. Vida means to know. And that which is known is expressed by the great Vedic rishis in the ancient hymns, the Vedic hymns. These Vedic hymns, many rishis in different periods, they uttered these hymns. In later days, Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa, who is known as Veda Vyasa, he compiled all these hymns, and not only he compiled all these hymns, he also classified them into 4 major books, 4 sections, and presented it to the society. Those 4 major sections, Rig, Yaju, Sama, Atharvana, they are known as. The Rig consisted of mantras. When we perform a havan or when we perform a puja, etc., we utter mantras. The Gayatri mantra is there. Similarly, there are so many other mantras. The collection of the mantras, they are in the Rig Veda. Yaju, it comes from the root yajna. We perform the havan. In the havan, we make offerings to the fire god. Ghee and other objects are offered in the havan, and we perform that ritual. That performance of that ritual, the rules and regulations, how to perform that ritual, they all come under Yajurveda. So Rig Veda, essentially the mantras, Yajurveda, the way of performing all these, Yajna, Havan, etc. Samaveda, while performing this worship, etc., the great rishis, they burst into devotion. They sang the praises of those gods that were worshipped. It was known as Samagana. And all these Samagana, it is incorporated in the Samaveda. Usually, the Vedas are called Trayi. Trayi means 3. Because in the ancient period, they recognized this Rig, Yaju and Sama as the essential parts of the Vedas. In later days, the Atharvana Veda also came into existence. What is this Atharvana Veda? Somebody has sickness, somebody has got some other material problem. In order to solve these problems, various methods were prescribed by the rishis. Adoration and worship of the planets according to astrological science. Ayurveda, producing medicine from different herbs, etc. Tulasi, Gudichi, all these herbs, etc. Using stones, etc. The Rudraksha, according to Vedic rishis, this Rudraksha that we wear, it has got medicinal effect. Now modern science has accepted that those who are wearing the Rudraksha, their body temperature is maintained by the mala that they wear. It is scientifically proven. So all these various methods of protecting ourselves, protecting the society, medicine, Ayurveda, then Dhanurveda, protecting from the enemies, from outside attack, wild animals or wild beings. All these comes under the in the last section, Rig Yajur Sama Atharvana Veda. Atharvana is constituted of all these techniques and methods of protecting ourselves. So, the ancient Vedic way of life, it consisted, the Vedic philosophy consisted of Rig, Yajur, Sama and Atharvana. Now, as I said, the Vedic scriptures were compiled by Vedavyasa. He not only classified these Vedas into 4 sections, Rig, Yajur, Sama and Atharvana. For each, he gave 4 parts. When I perform a havan or a puja, I use mantras. That part is called mantra. The spells, for example, Om Bhur-Bhuvasvaha Tattvadirvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. It is the mantra addressed to sun God, invoking him, the one who sustains all beings. For his favor, we invoke him. Such mantras, that becomes the first part of the mantra. And now these mantras are employed in our ritualistic worship, karma. When we perform that karma, the method of doing it, Brahmanas, in the Vedic literature, the Brahmanas instruct us how to perform all these. That becomes the Karma Kanta. And mantras, Brahmanas, and the next section is Upanishads. Why we perform this havan, puja, etc., rites, etc., to attain the highest knowledge of God. That knowledge or wisdom, it is expounded in this section, Jnana Kanda, it is known as a section of knowledge or wisdom, that is Upanishads. So, mantras, Brahmanas, Upanishads, it is also known as Vedanta. Why it is called Vedanta? Because it is the ultimate end of that Vedic wisdom, Jnana Kanda. So, this is the classification of the Vedas. This Jnana Kanda leads us to that ultimate stage in life. Last class I explained that a young boy goes to the abode of the master, sits at the feet of the master, he learns everything from the master. That period we found it is called as Brahmacharya. And when he becomes a full-fledged young man, he settles down in life. He has to earn and sustain himself and his family. He gets married. So, from Brahmacharya, he moves to Garhastya. And we found that at one stage, when his responsibilities to the family, to the society, all are over, he withdraws himself from all fields of activities and turns within That we found as Vanaprastha, going into the hermitage in the forest and settling down there, doing meditation, contemplation, etc. Sadhana, japa sadhana. So enters into that third stage, and finally he attains the highest knowledge or wisdom. He becomes a sannyasi. Samyak nyasa means one who is well reined, well arranged, well settled in his life. So he becomes a sannyasi. These parts of the Vedas are linked to these four parts. As brahmachari, he learns the mantras, etc. from the master, concentrates on the mantras. When he comes to the Grihastha ashrama, more he is in the ritualistic side. So the Brahmanas come to his aid, mantras, Brahmanas, and he starts contemplation, meditation, etc. as a Vanaprasthi. Finally, he comes to that stage of Upanishadic knowledge or wisdom, Samyak Nyasa. So these stages are linked to the four sections of the Vedas. The Vedic rishis when I explained mantra, Brahmana, Aranyaka and Upanishad, when he becomes a Vanaprasthi, that section is known as Aranyakas. Usually Aranyakas are associated with the Upanishads. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. That Upanishad is named as an Aranyaka. Aranyaka means that which is learned during the life in the forest. Vanaprastha is forest life. So Aranyakas is that part of the Vedas on which we concentrate when we are in the Vanaprastha life. So Brahmana, first mantras as a brahmachari, and next Karmakanda, Brahmanas and mantras as a brahmachari, Brahmanas as a karmakandi, one who performs havans, etc. Aranyakas as a Vanaprasthi, and Upanishad as a sannyasi. So all these four sections, four parts of the Brahmanas, four parts of the Vedas, they are linked to the four stages in the life of an Aryan. Aryan means one who is practicing the highest way of life. Brahmachari, mantra, Grihastha, Brahmana, Vanaprasthi, Aranyaka, and Sannyasi, the Upanishads. This development of Vedic religion, the goal of the Vedic religion, the ancestors made it very clear, twofold goal. Adi Devikam, Adi Bhaudikam. Adi Devikam means divine grace, seeking for the divine grace, blessings of the divine. Adi Bhautikam is for our material well-being. The rishis classified the life goal into two sections, Abhyudaya and Nishreyasa. Abhyudaya means worldly welfare. When we are in this world, we have to live. I need food, I need a house, I need a family to help me, I need farms, I need materials. All these I must get. Abhyutaya. What is Nisrayas? All these, from here I enter into a higher realm. That is Nisrayas, divine knowledge, wisdom, sannyasa. So Abhyutaya for the worldly welfare and Nisrayasa for divine knowledge and wisdom. These are considered to be the most important goals of life, human existence. Abhyutaya Nisrayascha, that is Aryan life. Now, Vedic scholars like Max Muller and others, they give us the various stages of development of this Vedic religion. They say that in the process of evolution, there are different steps. Similarly, in the development of this Vedic way of life also, there was a beginning and slowly the evolution started for higher stages. First, they said nature worship. The Aryans started worshipping, as I told you, the sun, the moon, the planets, the trees, the wind. These were the gods of worship. So the first stage of the Vedic religion, according to these scholars, is worship of Mother Nature, Prithvi, Dew, Akasha, and Prithvi, earth. These were Agni, fire. These were the earliest gods that were worshipped by man. Slowly, the Vedic rishis, they, in their immense wisdom, they started anthropomorphizing these gods. The fire god, the sun god, and the wind god, they were given a human form. You find in this picture Gayatri, sun god. The sun is there riding the chariot with the 4 horses. He is Surya Narayana. He has got, because he is Vishnu, the disc and the chakra in his hand. It is an anthropomorphic description of sun. That's what we find in the Gayatri. Similarly, the moon is also given an anthropomorphic form. The wind god is also supposed to be very powerful. Varuna, they adore and worship. Sea-going people, those who go for trade through sea routes, and those fishermen, they all worship Varuna. So Indra, Mitra, Varuna, they were all conceived in the form of human beings. They gave an anthropomorphic form for these gods and they created idols. The stage from nature worship, they come to the stage of worshipping the idols. So these natural forces were given some name and form, and this idol worship started. And then the next stage, from this idol worship, there was a gradual development to a higher concept of God. They started symbolism. We have got Sri Chakra, we have got Om, Omkara, A, U, M. These 3 letters combined together, Om. We find it in all the temples, we find that Om symbol, we find the Sri Chakra symbol. Worship of anthropomorphic form, it gradually gave way to worship of these symbols. When they started evolving to a higher level, they stopped worshipping the idols, etc., but they started concentrating on these symbols. The worship of these symbols, it is considered to be the third stage of development in the ancient Vedic worship. And the next stage was polytheism. Polytheism is worshipping several gods, because Indra, Mitra, Varuna and so many other gods in the later days, they created the Puranic gods also. So, gradually, polytheism, worshipping several gods. A man, at one time he will worship, for Makara Sankranti, he will worship the sun god. For some other program, he will worship the moon god, Purnamasi, etc. And then he will worship the various fire god and other gods in different occasions. So, one person worshipping several gods at a time, not one single god, this was called the period of polytheism. Poly means many. Polytheism means worshipping of many gods. Theos is God, worshipping of many gods. That period is known as polytheism. So, from polytheism, then emerged the next stage, monotheism. This monotheism, instead of worshipping so many gods, etc., represent all these gods in one single one. It is only one ultimate God who takes to these forms. That idea, the development of that idea of unity of all gods, unity of all religious worship in one form, that came to be known as monotheism. So there is only one Prajapati, and he manifests in all these forms. So that period of worshipping one who is the source of many, that is monotheism. Finally, when we find to that Upanishadic stage, when we reach that Upanishadic stage, we find that even the external forms, worship and adoration of external forms, they give way for contemplation and meditation of that ultimate reality within us in the form of the supreme consciousness. That idea of worshipping a nameless, formless God, that is monism. It is that ultimate consciousness which manifests in the form of all these various forces of nature and which produces the world of objects, the world of beings. It is the supreme consciousness, as we found earlier. So that stage is monism. So these are the different stages of development of the Vedic religion according to our scholars. The great rishis, they gave us a very beautiful way of life. As I pointed out, that in our Vedic way of life, in the symbolism, we found Brahmanas, they guide the entire society. Brahmano asya mukhamasida. The Brahmins, they were the brain of the whole society. They were the guides of the society. And Rajanya, the kings, the Rajas, the kingdom ruled by the Rajas, the kings. They were known as Vishayas. Among the Rajas, for every society, there are several rulers. There is a captain for a village, there is a chief for a town, there is a chief for the state, there is a chief for the whole nation. This classification, it was there in the Vedic period also. The Vishayas, small villages, units, they were all ruled by chieftains. And a society consisting of various sections of the people, they joined together in a particular territory, they formed a state, Rajya. We all know that this ancient Bharatavarsha consisted of many kingdoms. The Chera, the Chola, the Pandya, the Pallava, so many kingdoms we find in the Indian history. Society was divided into all these Rajyas, and each Rajya had a chieftain, Raja, who controlled the village people, the town people, who controlled the army, who controlled the agriculturists, who controlled the educational institutions. That was the duty of the Raja, to protect the Brahmanas. A Raja, he always welcomed the Brahmanas to his palace and honored them. The warriors who were protecting captains, they were also honored. In the Pattabhisheka of the Raja in our ancient culture, it is the working class, the peasant and the laborer who come and take the crown and put it on the head of the king, because the king depended on the subjects and the subjects must honor the king. So at the time of the Pattabhisheka, it is the common people who crowned the king. That was our ancient custom. So there were Rajas. In a big geographical territory like an island or a subcontinent, there are so many Rajyas. And for the protection of that whole territory, now in our Vedas, this land was known as Bharatavarsha. In our mantras, when we chant the mantras, we say, Meroho Dakshine Parshe, Bharatavarshe, Bharatakande, Meroho Dakshine Parshe, Bharatavarsha, the whole subcontinent was known as Bharatavarsha, Bharatakanda, and so many Rajyas were there. For the protection of that whole Bharatavarsha, they had to choose one supreme chieftain. There are other chieftains, Rajas, and from among the Rajas, one must be chosen as the supreme one who will be responsible in protecting all the Rajas, all these Rajyas. He was known as Chakravarti. Chakra in Sanskrit means a circle. Chakravarti means the one who sits in the middle of that circle. There are so many states, Karnataka, Andhra, Tamil Nadu. Today we have got all these states. In the ancient period, Chera, Chola, Pandya, all these kingdoms. And for all these, the entire circle, one was the chieftain. He was known as Chakravarti. How was that Chakravarti chosen? It is a natural law that only the mighty and powerful can emerge as the supreme protector. The Rajas used to conduct Rajasuya Yaga. If a Raja, someone, he thinks that he is capable of protecting the whole Bharatavarsha or the subcontinent, he will send his horse on Yaga, Rajasuya Yaga. The horse will pass through different territories, different kingdoms. The kings of those kingdoms, if they think that they are more valorous than the one who had sent that Ashwa, they will engage him in a war. And the one who sends the Ashwa, if he defeats that one who resists, then the person who is resisting that horse sacrifice, he must surrender and accept the person who sends the Rajasuya horse as the Chakravarti. So like that, the horse will travel in different Rajyas, and ultimately all these Rajyas will be consolidated, and the one who consolidates all these Rajyas, he was known as Chakravarti. In our Puranas, we find the Rajasuya Yaga conducted by Raghu Maharaja. In the Ramayana, we find Rama sending the horses. and his own son Lava and Kusha preventing the horses when they were passing near the Valmiki ashram. All these we find. So this Rajasuya Yaga, through that they created the empires. So the Rajas, the Chakravarti, and Chakravarti, he becomes the king of the entire subcontinent or nation. So this is the duty of the king or emperor, to protect the people, but he must honor the Vedic rishis as well as all the common people. In the Rajasuya Yaga, we find that after the victory, after the Chakravarti establishes victory over other kingdoms, immediately he gives back all those kingdoms to the respective kings. It is not usurping the power or usurping the land of the subjugated king. Only for the purpose of becoming the Chakravarti, this war is held, and after the war is over, everything is returned to the respective kings, and they become his subordinates. He becomes the suzerain, and they all become the subordinates. This is the ancient system of rule of Bharatavarsha, which we find in our scriptures. Now, Vedic philosophy, this Vedic way of life, ultimately it must lead every citizen of this land to that highest knowledge, highest realm of knowledge or wisdom. That is given in our Upanishads. The Upanishadic scriptures, they give us Upanishad. We found that explanation of that word, that which leads us nearer to. In one sense, it is leading us nearer to our master. In another sense, it is leading to the ultimate reality, wisdom of the ultimate reality. So, in the Upanishads, we find two main concepts. One is Atman and another one Brahman. Brahman comes from the Sanskrit root Brihat, that which is everywhere, that which is spread everywhere, Brihat, Brahman. Atman means that which is within us. So, that supreme consciousness which is spread all over, that is Brahman. And when it manifests within us, it becomes the Atman. The Upanishads, they all lay stress on this concept of Atman and Brahman. They are not two different things. In the various Upanishads, it is very beautifully explained. The summary of each and every Upanishad, it points to one ultimate truth, or which is known as Mahavakya. In the Chandogya Upanishad, if you go to Sabarimala, yesterday Makara Sankranti, there was Makara Valak Jyoti. They lit that, they found that Jyoti arising on the top of the Sabarimala. In the temple entrance, in Malayalam, you find the words Tattvamasi, that thou art. This message is given in Chandogya Upanishad. They have taken it from there. What does it mean? That ultimate reality which you adore or worship, it is nothing other than yourself. My own consciousness, individual consciousness, it is that ultimate reality. Tata is that ultimate reality. Tvam means you, myself. That thou art. It teaches, Chandogya Upanishad teaches us that don't search for God outside. You are God. Realize yourself. So that is the message of Chandogya Upanishad. And that is described in another word, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad very emphatically declares, Aham Brahmasmi. Aham means I, me. I am the Supreme Brahman. Aham Brahma Asmi. Asmi means am. I am Brahman. Aham Brahmasmi. The first Chandogya Upanishad that thou art, and here Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says, proudly proclaims, I am that Supreme Brahman. But when I say I, what is that I? I may mean my body. I am going, I am walking, I am eating. It is the function of the body. But that I refers to the body. I am thinking, I have a thought that refers to my intellect. I am happy, I am sorrowful, that I refers to my mood, consciousness of happiness or consciousness of worry. But ultimately, what is that I? The thinker, the feeler, the doer in me, that is the I. So, I am Atma Brahma. The self which is within me, that is Brahman. So, Tattvamasi, Chandogya Upanishad, Aham Brahmasmi, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, I am Atma Brahma, the self which is reveling within me, that is Brahman. Then, where will I find it, that self which is within me? Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma, all that I see around is nothing but the manifestation of that self. In the dream state, the worldly consciousness vanishes. In the deep sleep state, even the dream consciousness vanishes. And what remains is only that self. But again, when I wake up, once again, I see the entire universe around me. Where from the entire universe came? It came from me only, from the Supreme Consciousness, everything manifests. But for that Supreme Consciousness, we found there is no world. If I am not there, there is no world. That I consciousness, if it is not there, the world of objects, Vishwam Darpana Drishyamana Nagari Tulyam, Adi Shankaracharya says, the whole world, it is like an appearance. In Western philosophy also, they accepted this truth. Bishop Berkeley wrote, Bradley has written Appearance and Reality, and Western idealists, they proclaimed that the world of objects is only an appearance. In reality, there is only the Supreme Consciousness. This philosophy is accepted by the Western philosophers also. Even Socrates and Aristotle, they accepted this philosophy that the entire manifest world is nothing but the consciousness. It is accepted by even Greek philosophers. So, Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma, all that you see around, everything, the sun, the stars, the moons, the planets, the earth, the human beings, the animals, the creepers, everything, it is nothing but that Supreme Consciousness. So, Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma. This is the highest realization that a man gets. One who reaches that state, he is liberated from the world. He walks like a madman. The great Siddhas, they were appearing like madmen. Bhagavan Yogi Ram Surat Kumar, my master, he used to wander in Tiruvannamalai, unmindful of the external circumstances. Sometimes the dogs will bark at him. Sometimes urchins will throw stones at him. He never bothered about all those things. He was free from all external things, lived a life of highest bliss and happiness, because he realized that everything is himself, Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. So, this is the highest realization that a human being achieves. The great rishis, they pointed out that how the self manifests into the world, how the consciousness manifests into the world, they pointed out different stages in the evolution. Take that kerchief, duster. Evolution of this self-consciousness. Now, the Supreme Consciousness, it manifests as mind, the self. Supreme Consciousness is the self. How does it recognize the world of objects? That faculty of recognizing the world of objects is known as vasana. We say that it is his Purva Janma Vasana or it is his Vasana, his inclination. That inclination, that Vasana, through that Vasana, he has three functions. This Vasana functions through his three instruments. I have got body, mind and intellect. How do I look at the world? The self, through the vasanas, it perceives through the body, mind, intellect. Through the body, I have got perception, from mind, feeling, and from intellect, thinking. Perception, feeling, thinking. And what do I perceive? I perceive the objects. The sense organs gives me the perception. Eyes, I look at the things. Here, I get the perception of sound. Through nose, I get the perception of smell. Tongue, I get the perception of taste. By touching, I get the perception of objects, senses, sense perception. So, these are the instruments of body. My eyes, the nose, my tongue, my skin, all these are instruments of perception. What I perceive is object. The sound, the taste, and everything, the sight. These are the objects that I get. Feeling, I get emotions, happiness, sorrow, distress. Emotions, feeling is a feeling of emotions. And what do I get through thinking? Thoughts, all ideas. Idea is thought. So, from self, through the vasanas, body, mind and intellect functions, and I got perception, feeling, thinking of objects, emotions, thoughts. So these object, emotion, thoughts, they constitute the world. My whole world of objects that I experience, Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma, it is that consciousness which manifests as this whole world. This process is beautifully explained by our Upanishads. So, the Aryan life, Vedic way of life, it very emphatically declared that ultimate goal of human existence is realizing this supreme truth that all is nothing but Brahman, I am that. In the next class, we will go into the various aspects of the Vedic religion. and we will go into the Upanishads also, how the Upanishads explain this Brahman, it becomes Ishvara and Hiranyagarbha and the world of objects, Vaishwanara, the power, and how the macrocosmic world arises, and how the microcosmic world within me, that is also as arising from out of the supreme consciousness. These are all Upanishadic wisdom. We will go into it in the next class. Jai Sri Ram.